All right, good afternoon. We are going to take a look at the anatomy of the human eye and just briefly look at the receptors involved in the human body with the sensory neurons. My name is Lizelle van Wyk, and I will be your biology teacher or your life science teacher. So at the end of the lesson, you will be able to identify the receptors in the sensory neurons and be able to describe the basic anatomy of the eye. Now, for your receptors, you only need to be aware that the neurons, the sensory neurons have receptors. The body responds to a variety of different stimuli, such as light, sound, touch, pain, and chemicals. You don't need to know the structure or the names, except you need to know about the eye and the ear, the receptors in the eye and the receptors in the ear. For today, we're going to look at the structure and the function of the parts of the human eye using a diagram, and this will all be in paper 1. So your peripheral nerve endings are abundant in the skin, muscle, and joints. You have 5 basic sensory receptors existing in the human body. You just need to be aware that they exist. You don't need to know their names or their structure. You have thermoreceptors that detect change in temperature. Mechanoreceptors detect change in physical deformation. Nociceptors respond to pain, and photoreceptors are the visual receptors of the retina. You need to know these. We'll look at them in more detail. And then you have chemoreceptors that detect smell, taste, internal stimuli such as pH and metabolic concentrations. Now the eye is protected by several structures. You have your eyelid. It protects against the light entering, so you can squint on sunny days. It also protects by blinking, so it wipes dust particles out. It also spreads tears over your eyeball, preventing the drying up of the conjunctiva. Then you have eyelashes. Eyelashes shields from dust particles. And your conjunctiva is the inside. It lines the eyelid and the surface of the eye. It's a thin, transparent membrane, and it lubricates by tears secreted by the lacrimal gland. All you need to know is how the eye is protected. It's also in an eye socket. It's protected by the cranium. And that's it. Now, the eyes are found as a pair positioned at the front of the skull. The field of vision from each eye overlaps, which allows a slightly different image of the same object from each eye. You have binocular vision, vision using 2 eyes with overlapping fields of view, so that the separate images are combined and interpreted as one image by the brain. We will look more at that in a later lesson. And then you have stereoscopic vision, the ability to form 3-dimensional images, which provides the ability to judge distance, depth, and the size of an object. These are the structures of the eye. It's easier to study it if you know that the eye is divided into 3 layers: the outside layer, the inside layer, and a middle layer. So we will look at each layer separately when we do the anatomy. So the outer layer is made up of the sclera, the cornea, the pupil, and the lens. The middle layer has got the iris, the ciliary body, and the choroid. You also have the inner layer, the retina, the optic nerve, and the vitreous humor. We will look at the outer layer first. So it's the structural adaptations of the sclera is that it's a tough, white, inelastic layer that covers the eye towards the posterior end. It's the back. Its adaptation is that a protection of the eye because it is inelastic. It protects the inner structure of the eye and it maintains the shape of the eye. Your cornea is transparent. It allows the light to pass through the convex shape. It causes refraction, so the bending in of light. It allows the light to pass through because it is see-through, and it causes the refraction of light, so an image can be focused on the retina. So here you have your cornea. As you can see, it is a see-through layer. The light passes through and light is refracted. It's not refracted, light passes through, and it helps to focus an image. The fact that the cornea is bent focuses the light on a specific area. Then you have your sclera. Your sclera keeps the shape of your eyeball. It is for protection, and it helps for muscle attachment. It's very, very tough. And then you have your lens. Your lens is elastic and it's biconvex, so it is shaped a little bit like a rugby ball or an egg. It is behind the pupil of the iris and is held in place by your suspensory ligaments. It is also transparent. And the lens can change shape depending if you focus on a distance or focus on things close by, and it allows the light to pass through. So here you have a diagram of the lens. The lens is oblong or biconvex, and if the lens wasn't, then light would simply pass through, an image would pass through, it will not be focused, but because of the shape of the lens, and this is a little bit of physical science, the light is bent and focused in one position. Now we look at the middle layer. It consists of the iris, the ciliary body, and the choroid. So your iris is the colored part of the eye, and it's got an opening in the center called the pupil. The iris contains two types of muscles to control the size of the pupil. It can either contract or relax, and that helps to control the amount of light entering through the eye through the papillary mechanism. The iris is the colorful part of the eye, and iris is the word for rainbow. And so that's why we call the iris, because it's different colored eyes. The ciliary body contains the ciliary muscles, and it is the thickened part of the anterior of the choroid. The ligaments attached to the ciliary body is the suspensory ligaments. So here you have your ciliary muscle, and there you have your suspensory ligaments. And they contract or relax to alter the tension of the suspensory ligaments. So if the muscle contracts or relaxes, it will have a direct effect on the ligaments, and the ligaments hold the lens in place. It also changes the shape of the lens. Now, if the ciliary muscle is relaxed, the suspensory ligament is pulled tight, and if it is contracted, the ligament is relaxed or slack, and this will change the shape of the lens. We will learn a little bit more about this when we look at the function of the eye and how it works. So the choroid is a dark colored layer which contains blood vessels and pigments. It absorbs all the light, so it prevents the reflection of light, and the blood vessels supply nutrients and oxygens to the cell of the retina. So here you have your choroid. Your choroid is full of blood vessels, and it supplies all the nutrients and oxygens to the cell of the retina. It also helps to absorb light and prevents reflection of light. So that was the middle layer. Last but not least, we have the inner layer. Now, the inner layer is the retina. The retina is the inner layer of the eye. It contains the rods and the cones that are sensitive to light. We will look a little bit more into this when we discuss how we see, or the function of the eyes. Rods respond to low intensity light, so it's easier to see in the dark. Cones respond to bright light and provide sharp, clear color vision. And then the retina also has lots of neurons that carry impulses from the rods and cones through the optic nerve to the cerebrum. Now in the retina, there's also a small indentation, a little dimple or a little hollow at the back of the eyeball where all the cones are found. This is the area of the clearest vision. Behind that, just below it, there's the yellow spot. There's an area where there are no rods, no cones, and thus no vision. This is called the blind spot. And this is the area where the blood vessels enter the eye. It's also the area where the optic nerve leaves the eye. The optic nerve transmits impulses to the cerebrum for interpretation, and the blood vessels bring oxygen and nutrients to the inner part of the eye. So this is a close-up of the retina. Here you can see the macula or the yellow spot. Just below that will be the blind spot. This is your optic nerve. Now the structure and function of the eye, the yellow spot, there are no rods present, only cones. It is the density of the cones is the highest in the yellow spot. It's the clearest image with the greatest color discrimination is found here. Then we have the blind spot. There are no photoreceptors there. It's the point where the optic nerve leaves the eyeball and you can't see. So I'm going to leave a little bit of time here so that we can identify A, B, and C, as well as regulate the amount of light entering the eye, which part contains a dark pigment that absorbs excess light in the eye, and which part contains receptors sensitive to light. This is either the outer, the middle, or the inner layer. Now, A is the sclera, B is the cornea, and C is the pupil. Remember, the lens is not F is the lens. C is the pupil. Give the letter and name of the part that regulates the amount of light entering the eye. That is C, it's the pupil. It either constricts or dilates. Then contains a dark pigment that absorbs excess light in the eye. That will be the choroid. That is G. And then the last one contains receptors sensitive to light. That is the retina, and that is the innermost part, E. So in tomorrow's lesson, we will be looking at how the eye works, how do we see, and we'll also do a brief revision of the parts of the eye because it's incredibly important to know the anatomy of the eye for the exam.